Today, we become legends.
Looking for the best picks to grind ranked or what to look out for in OB11? Well, this video is for you. Let's jump into the top 3 gods for every conquest role to carry your games in patch OB11. As always, this list is a combination of my own experience in Masters Ranked, the opinions of top players that I've come across, as well as win rates and pick ban rates in Masters Plus Ranked. So without further ado, let's jump in with our first role, the junglers. So my first pick for jungle is a pretty obvious one, and that's Kali. She's been insanely strong since her release not too long ago, and the only thing that's changed really is that her intelligence burst build has been heavily nerfed, and I now recommend her with a shredder on hit attack speed build like you would have done in Smite 1. The int build can still work okay, but I definitely think going for a shredder build is the best way to play her right now. Of course, she still does Kali things with this build and can shred through your whole team while having immunity to death as a fallback. She can even do decent split pushing and structure damage thanks to the on-hit items proccing on towers in Smite 2, though this was nerfed recently. Regardless though, Kali is absolutely still one of, if not the top jungler in OB11 and absolutely worth playing if it's left unbanned, which won't happen often in my experience. Next up, we have another familiar face, and that's Aladdin, who remains strong in OB11. You all know this guy if you've been playing Smite 2 at all. He completely breaks the game in a lot of ways through his wishes that can get him massively fed or turn a fight that was otherwise losing into a complete win for him and his team. Plus, the lamp is a complete game changer that can break fights wide open by essentially choosing an enemy you know you can 1v1 and deleting them from existence, lamping the enemy mage so you can secure or steal an objective, lamping the enemy solo or jungle when they engage on your team to pick them off without their team being able to help. This guy just breaks the game, and on top of that has absolutely amazing damage and mobility in his kit in general to boot. He can be a little slow to get online and won't win many super early engagements unless you're burning wish for power, but once he gets a couple of items online, this guy becomes an absolute menace that's incredibly hard to deal with. Absolutely one of the top junglers right now. So my final jungle pick was a little harder to choose, and I did consider Fenrir and OB11 for this spot as well, as I think they're both pretty good right now, but ultimately I gave the spot to Hunbat, who's been surprisingly effective in my experience lately, and I've seen a lot of other top players with a similar opinion. Despite the nerf to his ultimate, Hunbat still does an absolute ton of work right now, and his base kit is actually really strong. The ability to just 3, charge your 2, teleport in, AA cancel, and jump out with minimal risk is underrated from this guy in my opinion. That can be easily half health or more on a backliner with no real commitment from Bats himself, as he just jumps out at the end of it. And if you feel like you can secure the kill, you just drop your ult instead of jumping out. You can go aspect or no aspect on this guy in jungle, and I think both work quite well. I generally see a bit more aspect bats than non-aspect, but both work, and you can basically trade a bit of damage for an extra stun and slow, which can be valuable, especially in certain matchups where having a stun to interrupt something like a Fenrir Brutalize is worth losing the damage for. As mentioned before, OB11 and Fenrir could have taken this spot too, and I think they're both great, but ultimately I think Bats is a little bit better, though OB11 and Fen can both be better into certain matchups as they are more counter pick heavy than Bats, who just works pretty much always. But that's it for the junglers. Let's move on to mid, where we have a new face taking my first spot, and that is of course the monster herself, Scylla. She's new for OB11, so take this placement with a grain of salt as we've had limited time to play with her and against her, but I gotta say she feels pretty strong in my experience, and other top players and the stats agree with that. I don't think she's outright broken or anything, and she does have a very weak early game that can be exploited, but man, once this pick gets online with a few items and Polynomicon, she starts deleting people in classic Scylla fashion. Catching a squishy with your 1 in the late game is basically just a free kill if they don't have beads or Aegis, and it's on a 10-second cooldown without any CDR, so more like 7 or 8 seconds with a typical build. So you can just throw this out, fish for a hit, and if you land it, it's just a free kill most of the time once her build is online. Her ultimate also hits ridiculously hard with the new +1 that adds 2% scaling per hit and 6% scaling per kill. This can easily reach upwards of 20 stacks late game, and it's hitting for 900 base damage and 160% intelligence at that point. And 20 stacks is a conservative estimate. You can often get way more than that if you're landing kills with it throughout the match. But the really scary thing about Scylla though is that she doesn't even need her ult to one-shot you really. She can just 1+2 and poly basic attack, and that's enough in the late game to delete a squishy. As I mentioned before, she is new for this patch, and as of writing we've only had access to her for a few days, but she appears to be pretty damn strong out of the gate and one of the top mid laners right now. Next up for mid is a spot that I feel pretty vindicated to put on the list, and that's Zeus. I've been screaming from the rooftops about how OP this pick is for a while now, and it seems people are starting to recognize how truly strong he is. This god is just ridiculous. He has probably the highest damage output of any mid in the the game, comes online faster than Scylla does, and is surprisingly safe with the right build. Items like Bloodbound Book, Jade Scepter, or Cersei's Hexstone can keep this guy incredibly safe, and he doesn't really mind sacrificing a little bit of damage to get these because he does plenty of damage already. The main issue is just keeping him alive. If a Zeus can survive a fight, he is almost certainly carrying that fight, and with one or more of these items and a little bit of peel from his support, that is easily doable right now in my opinion. Hell, you can even play this guy in ADC and solo, and I think he works great in those roles too, but I don't like to put one god in for multiple roles in the video. And honestly, I wouldn't say he's quite top 3 in those roles anyway, so he's just going to be in mid for here. But yeah, Zeus is nuts right now and definitely a top 3 mid laner for OB11. And my final mid pick is one that might surprise a few people, that being Neith. Honestly, I don't know how this god flies under the radar as much as she does right now. Her damage with an intelligence-based burst build is just off the charts. She's almost like Scylla in the way that her 1+2 plus Polynomicon basic is often enough to just delete a backliner mid to late game, and if they're somehow still alive, you have the backflip to finish them off, which is surprisingly hard as well. Not to mention her unmissable global stun that does half your health with full build and can allow her to impact fights without even rotating throughout the earlier mid game, which means she either keeps farming while the enemy mid rotates and gets ahead, or the enemy mid also farms and you just have an extra bump to help your team win a fight. As I said, you might be surprised that I'm putting Neith in top 3 for mid right now, but I genuinely think she's insanely strong and just underrated by a lot of people right now. Moving on though, let's cover the ADC role, where my first pick will be another familiar face to anyone who's played the game at all recently, that being Aspect Agni. This pick is just insane. ADC builds right now are really strong, especially the crit build, which Aspect Agni synergizes well with due to getting double combustion stacks from crits. Basically, Agni gets to do as much basic attack damage as any other ADC, but also has solid ability damage due to his base damages being pretty high, and his combustion damage from the aspect that scales off of strength hitting really hard. The other thing that makes this pick so nuts though is that he has an unmissable easy access AoE stun, which is not something that ADCs typically have. If you don't have beads, trying to fight an Aspect Agni is not going to end well, because he'll just stun you and shred you down with crits before you can really do anything. Every other ADC either doesn't have a stun, or their stun is a little bit conditional or hard to land, like Anher's Impale or Barry's Enhanced Spells, for example. Agni just has a free stun that is impossible to miss and even hits in an AoE to boot, which is just ridiculous to have on an ADC that crits you for as much damage as he does, and has solid AoE burst damage through abilities. Anyway, I don't think I need to explain too much here. You all know Aspect Agni is nuts. Let's move on. Next up, we have Princess Barry, who has taken some pretty significant nerfs recently, but I think is still a top 3 ADC in my mind, and even works in mid 2 if you want to play her there. Much like Aspect Agni, this pick probably doesn't need too much explanation, as she's been top 3 since her release, but yeah, this god is still pretty insane in what she does. Her 3 still hits ridiculously hard, she still gets a free ability cast and a bunch of free stats from her passive, her ultimate still buys her and potentially her team a ton of time. The crit build is still OP and works amazing on her, but we've even seen some more ability-based lifesteal builds emerging recently, and those are arguably even stronger than going crit, or hell, you could even go lifesteal and crit in the same build. I've seen that do well too. Barry is still really strong despite recent nerfs, and absolutely worth picking for ADC right now, or even mid and solo if you want to play her there. But moving on to my final ADC for the list, and that is the new face on the block, that being Apollo. Of course, this guy has an aspect as well, which makes him a pretty strong support and solo, but that's not what we're talking about here. Just a straight up ADC crit Apollo is, in my opinion, top 3 in the ADC role right now. He just has a fundamentally strong kit right now, with great safety through his long duration mez and dash, one of the best steroids in the game that he just gets passively, as you no longer have to worry about overcapping attack speed like you did in Smite 1, and on top of all of that, he has his ult, which can be used in a myriad of ways. Most notably is of course split pushing, which is already really strong and viable in Smite 2, but Apollo can do it basically with impunity, since as soon as you send someone to deal with his split push, he just ults over and makes a 5v4 fight for his team. But you could also just use this ult to let you farm without the risk of your team getting collapsed on in a 4v5. Most ADCs have to make the choice of do I farm or do I rotate. Apollo can sort of do both due to his ultimate. The ADC build right now is super strong, and Apollo is one of the best kits to slap that build onto. Definitely a top 3 ADC right now. But sticking with duo lane, let's talk about some supports next, with my first one being a familiar face. Yeah, Sobek's still pretty strong right now. He has taken some pretty significant nerfs over the last few months, but I think he still remains a top 3 support. This guy just has everything you need, really. Free protections from his passive, which makes him really tanky early game, letting him tank up minion waves and be aggressive in duo early on to snowball. His pluck is basically instant death to a squishy if they don't have bees in the late game. He has built-in anti-heal on the 3, which is really valuable right now due to all the healing and lifesteal going around. And he even has an execute ultimate ultimate just to top it off. Just don't go aspect on this guy and you're golden right now. Next up, we have another pick that's been resilient to nerfs and remains strong, that being Aphrodite. Now, right off the bat, I will say, personally, I think Afro is a little overrated right now, and just based on how strong she is, I think she's banned way too often, and other things should probably be banned over Afro. I think a good portion of her ban rate just comes from people not wanting to deal with her BS, which is understandable. That said, though, I do think she's still a top 3 support just due to the way she fundamentally breaks the game with her ultimate. Linking to a strong hyper carry like Aspect Agni ADC, Zeus mid, or whatever, and making them damn near unkillable is often enough to win games on its own right now. Sure, your team might lack frontline if you have an Afro support, especially if you don't have a frontline solo laner either, but her strengths far outweigh her weaknesses in my opinion, and she remains a top 3 support in OB11. And finally, my last support slot was a bit more contested, and I did consider Cerberus and Aspect Apollo here, but ultimately I went with Ares as my final pick for the list. Ares does have a lot of fundamental strengths within his kit, like his damage, single target lockdown, and ultimate that is sword, beads, or die, alongside his honestly broken passive that gives an insane amount of free stats just for building items you already wanted to build. But I think what really pushed Ares into the top 3 spot for me is his matchups into meta picks at the moment. His cripple finds so much value right now, it's honestly insane. It shuts down Barry's wave clear in lane, it shuts down half of Aladdin's kit, it stops Sobek from plucking, it stops Awilix from feather stepping, it shuts down Brutalize from Fenrir, it stops Thor from teleporting in after double tap, it stops Bats from teleporting in and or leaping away, and all of that is not even counting the general utility of shutting down characters' dashes and jumps like Agni, Scylla, Neith, Kali, etc. There's also an abnormally large amount of picks in the meta right now without CC immunity on their ultimate, such as Barry, Bats, Kali, Agni, Neith, Awilix, Zeus, and a few others. These gods are basically forced to burn their beads or have their support burn talisman, or they're getting pulled, which basically makes Ares even better into the meta right now. So yeah, that's the main reason Ares is here over some other picks like Cerberus or Aspect Apollo. His kit is pretty solid on its own, but he is insanely strong as a counter pick right now that will find value in basically every lobby. Moving on though, let's cover the final role for the list, the solo laners, starting off with a familiar face, that being Hades. Yeah, Hades is still strong even after the tank buffs in OB10, and he still dominates the laning phase, farms more effectively than almost any other pick, and deletes whole teams in the late game with his ultimate. Once you get past the first few levels and have some points in your 3, Hades insta-clears the wave and basically doesn't care about taking poke at all due to the healing, and from that point he just farms up and comes out swinging in the mid to late game with his crazy ultimate that also makes him pretty unkillable while he's in it, due to the massive amount of free protections it gives and popping Bloodbound Book. I don't think I need to do much explaining on Hades. You probably all know he's really strong right now if you played much at all lately, so let's move on to my next pick. Next up is a more traditional tanky solo pick though, and that is Aspect Thor, who I think is probably the best bruiser slash tank solo laner in the game right now. He's very well rounded with a solid early game laning phase due to his fast wave clear and a good late game as well, where he can be pretty damn tanky through strong protection items and healing via his passive, while still doing solid damage and CC output. It's really the healing that makes this pick so strong though. With 4.5% max health every 3 times you hit a god with Thunderstruck is kind of insane, and I think a lot of people overlook this, and I sometimes see people not building anti-healing into Thor solo, thinking they don't need it. This pick almost competes with Hades for healing output, and it's a large factor in how tanky he feels in late game team fights, so definitely bring out your Anks, Contagions, and Ruins against this guy. He can also be really hard to get away from due to the constant trembles from his passive and his base kit stun and movement ability, so once he gets on you, it's really hard to get him off without straight up killing him. Aspect Thor does literally everything you want from a tanky solo laner right now, and is absolutely top 3 in my eyes for OB11. If you want a tanky or bruiser solo to play, this guy is your man. And my final solo laner was a little harder to nail down, as there's a lot of good options right now, I think, such as mage solos like Morrigan or Zeus, some other tanks or bruisers like Mordred, Achilles, Kabrakan, and Odin, but ultimately, with my last pick, I went for Chak, who I think is pretty underrated in solo right now. You generally want to go Aspect with this guy, and when you do, he farms incredibly well, as he can just axe and 3 the wave and then walk away going to farm something else, and the wave will just be cleared for him. He's also really hard to fight into on the wave due to this, as if you're a melee solo laner, which most picks are right now, he massively slows down your attack speed and ticks you down over time with the rain. Chak is one of the best picks for dominating the laning phase right now, and his late game is no slouch either due to his giant AoE knockup and silence ultimate. As mentioned, there are honestly a lot of other picks that I think are almost as strong as Chak right now, and are definitely playable, but ultimately I think Chak takes the spot on the list by a hair. But that's all of my picks for the top 3 gods for every role in patch OB11. Let me know your thoughts down below, of course. Are there any picks I missed that you think should have made the list, or any that I put in top 3 that you think are trash? Let me know down below, and I'll catch you guys for another one later on. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.